I still remember the sound of that door slamming. It wasn't just wood against frame, it was the sound of my childhood ending. I'm Sophia Chen, and when I was 15, my stepfather looked me in the eyes and said, "You'll never amount to anything." Then he and my mother threw me out with nothing but a backpack and $37. Today, I'm the founder and CEO of NextGen Solutions, a tech conglomerate valued at $2.8 billion. But success didn't erase the scars. Sometimes, I still wake up thinking I'm sleeping on that park bench in Boston, rain soaking through my only jacket. My story isn't about revenge, though that would be easier to tell. It's about survival, about building something when the people who should have protected you instead try to break you. And it's about the choice we all face when betrayed. Let it destroy us or use it as fuel. Growing up in Newton, Massachusetts, our house was all about appearances. My mother married Richard when I was 6, after my biological father disappeared. From the outside, we looked perfect. The beautiful colonial house, the manicured lawn, the family photos where everyone smiled right on cue. Inside was different. Richard was obsessed with status and control. My mother became his shadow, erasing herself to keep the peace. I was expected to be the perfect Asian American daughter. Quiet, obedient, academically flawless. But I was never quiet enough, never obedient enough. My grades were excellent, but I asked too many questions. I had opinions they didn't give me. "Why can't you be more like Jennifer Liu's daughter?" my mother would ask, referencing our neighbor's child who'd been accepted to Harvard at 16. "She knows how to respect her parents." The comparison was constant, crushing. But it wasn't what broke us. The breaking point came during my sophomore year of high school. I developed an app that helped students organize study groups based on learning styles and subject difficulties. It was primitive by today's standards, but at the time, it gained traction at my school. A local tech blog even featured it, calling me a rising developer to watch. That evening, I left the article open on my laptop, hoping, stupidly perhaps, for some acknowledgement, some small recognition that I'd created something worthwhile. Instead, Richard threw my laptop across the room. "You think you're special now?" he shouted, while my mother stood silently behind him. "You think you can waste time on this garbage instead of focusing on real academics? No college will accept a girl with delusions of grandeur." I remember how calm my voice sounded when I replied, "It's not garbage. 300 students are using it, and I'm going to keep building it." His face changed then. Something hardened. "Not in my house." That night, during a dinner party they'd arranged with Richard's colleagues from the investment firm, I was instructed to play the role of grateful, humble daughter. I was supposed to talk about my excellent grades and my interest in attending his alma mater. Instead, I said quietly, "I'm going to develop my app further. I believe in what I'm creating." The silence was deafening. My mother's silverware clattered against her plate. Richard cleared his throat, smiled tightly at his colleagues, and said, "Kids and their silly hobbies. Now, about that Phillips Academy application." I interrupted him. "It's not a hobby, and I'm not applying to Phillips." What followed was a blur, the guests awkwardly excusing themselves, Richard's face purple with rage. My mother crying, not because I was about to be thrown out, but because I'd embarrassed them in front of people who mattered. "Either you stop this nonsense and follow the path we've laid out, or you get out." Richard's ultimatum came cold and final. I remember looking at my mother, hoping for some intervention, some sign that she'd protect her only child. Instead, she looked away and whispered, "Listen to your father, Sophia." "He's not my father," I said, and that was it. Richard grabbed a backpack, stuffed it with a few clothes, and thrust it at me along with the contents of my wallet, $37. He opened the front door wide, the January Massachusetts night bitter cold beyond it. "Leave," he said, his voice eerily calm now. "See how far your little app takes you. You'll be back begging within a week." I walked out without looking back, 15 years old with nowhere to go. The first night was the hardest. Boston in January isn't forgiving. I rode buses until they stopped running, then found a 24-hour cafe where a kind waitress let me stay until morning if I bought one coffee every few hours. I nursed those cups like lifelines, watching my meager funds dwindle. By morning, I tried calling my best friend Emma, but her mother answered. "Emma can't see you anymore," she said stiffly. "We've heard what happened." That's when I realized they'd started their campaign. Richard and my mother weren't just content with throwing me out, they needed to make sure I had nowhere to turn. Within 2 days, rumors circulated that I'd been caught stealing, that I was on drugs, that I was unstable. Former friends crossed the street to avoid me. A coffee shop where I'd applied for a job suddenly had no openings. My former chemistry teacher, who'd always supported me, looked away when I approached him for help. They were thorough, I'll give them that. They salted the earth behind me. After 3 days of sleeping in shelters and parks, I broke down and called my grandmother, my mother's mother, who lived on the other side of Boston. She was my last hope. When she answered, her voice was cold. "Sophia, your mother told me everything. I cannot have a thief in my house. Don't call again." I never did. Later, I learned they told her I'd stolen money, credit cards, even family heirlooms. None of it was true, but it didn't matter. The story was more convenient than the truth. That night, curled up on a park bench with rain soaking through my jacket, something inside me hardened. If they wanted to erase me, I'd make sure I became impossible to ignore. The next morning, I walked to the Boston Public Library as soon as it opened. I found a corner desk, pulled out my phone, the one thing they hadn't taken from me, and got to work. If I couldn't go home, I'd build myself a new future. For the next few weeks, I lived between shelters, the library, and a youth center I found that offered meals. I continued developing my app during every free minute, using library computers and free Wi-Fi wherever I could find it. I showered at the youth center, kept my clothes clean at laundromats, and maintained the appearance of someone who wasn't homeless, even though I was. A month into this new life, I met Marcus at the library. He was a college student studying computer science who noticed me working on code and stopped to chat. When he realized what I was building, and that I was doing it with virtually no resources, he introduced me to his professor, Dr. Elaine Winters. Dr. Winters changed everything. After seeing my work and hearing a sanitized version of my situation, I told her I was staying with friends temporarily. She offered me an unofficial internship at the university's tech incubator. It wasn't paid, but it gave me access to computers, software, and, most importantly, a community. By day, I worked at a cafe that Dr. Winters helped me get hired at. By night, I slept on a cot in a storage room at the incubator, something Dr. Winters arranged quietly, breaking several university rules in the process. Every free moment was spent coding, learning, building. 6 months after being thrown out, my app, now called StudySync, had 5,000 users across 3 local high schools and was beginning to attract attention. A small tech blog interviewed me, and I carefully constructed an image of a young, promising developer. I never mentioned being homeless. I never mentioned my parents. But they noticed. Of course they did. The first attempt came in the form of a cease and desist letter, claiming I had developed the app using family resources and that they owned intellectual property rights. It was absurd, but I didn't have money for a lawyer. Dr. Winters connected me with a law clinic at the university, and they helped me respond, but the threat loomed. Then came the email to Dr. Winters. I never saw it, but she showed me her response. "I'm afraid your characterization of Sophia doesn't match the dedicated, brilliant young woman I know. Perhaps you should be proud of what she's accomplished instead of trying to sabotage her." They didn't stop there. When StudySync caught the attention of a small angel investor willing to put $50,000 into developing it further, Richard somehow got his contact information. The investor called me, uncomfortable, saying he'd received concerning information about my background and was reconsidering. I asked him directly, "Did Richard Chen tell you I stole from my family and am mentally unstable?" His silence was answer enough. I took a risk. I told him the truth. All of it. About being thrown out, about the smear campaign, about living in shelters while building the app. I didn't beg. I simply laid out the facts and said, "Check my work. Judge me by what I've built, not by the stories told by people who couldn't control me." He invested double the original amount. That $100,000 became the foundation of what would later become Next-Gen Solutions. By 2018, StudySync had evolved into a comprehensive learning platform used by schools across Massachusetts. I had my own apartment, tiny but mine, and was taking computer science courses through the university's extension program. I'd legally emancipated myself with Dr. Winter's help. I thought I'd escaped them, but I underestimated their reach. One evening, I received a call from a Boston Globe reporter who'd been covering the local tech scene. "I'm working on a profile about you," she said cautiously, "but I've received some concerning information from your parents." My stomach dropped. "What did they say?" She hesitated. "They claim you stole their investment money to start your company. They've provided what look like bank statements showing transfers. They're saying you took your college fund." I almost laughed. There never was a college fund, at least not one intended for my use. Richard controlled every penny and made that abundantly clear. "I'd be happy to provide my complete financial records," I told her. "Every dollar that built StudySync is accounted for, starting with the $37 I had when I was thrown out at 15. The reporter paused. "Thrown out?" That article changed everything. The reporter didn't just verify my financial records. She investigated thoroughly, speaking to shelter workers who remembered me, the cafe manager who hired me, Dr. Winters, and others who corroborated my story. She tried multiple times to get comments from my mother and Richard, who eventually claimed I had run away after a typical teenage outburst. The youth shelter worker's quote in the article said it all. "I remember this girl coming in, clean, articulate, clearly not our usual demographic. She asked about shower facilities and meals but never stayed overnight. She was always working on her laptop in our common room until closing. I thought she was doing a school project on homelessness. I had no idea she was actually homeless herself." When the article came out, two things happened. Investor interest in StudySync exploded, and Richard and my mother went silent for almost a year. By 21, I had expanded beyond StudySync into other educational technology. NextGen Solutions was formally incorporated, with offices in Boston and 15 employees. We were valued at $20 million after our Series A funding. That's when they reappeared. The email came on my birthday, from my mother's account, but I recognized Richard's writing style. "Sophia, we've been watching your success with pride. It seems we were too harsh, and we'd like to reconcile. Families should support each other through difficult times. We're having financial difficulties and could use your help. After all, without the education and opportunities we provided during your formative years, none of this would have been possible." Attached was documentation for a second mortgage they'd taken out, credit card debt, and investment losses. They needed $350,000 to avoid foreclosure. I didn't respond. A week later, my grandmother called. The first contact since she'd told me not to call again years earlier. "Sophia, your mother misses you terribly," she began, her voice honey-sweet. "They're about to lose the house. Surely you can find it in your heart to help the people who raised you." "Did they tell you they threw me out at 15? I asked quietly. "Did they mention the rumors they spread to make sure no one would help me?" Silence. "Then, they said you were going through a phase, that you ran away. Ask them about the cease and desist letter. Ask them about contacting my investors. Ask them why, if they miss me so terribly, this is the first time they've reached out in 6 years, and only because they need money." She hung up. 3 days later, she called back. "I had no idea," she whispered. "Richard told me so many things. Your mother went along with everything. I believed them. It was the first genuine apology I'd received from anyone in my family." "I don't need their money," I told her. "But I'd like to have a grandmother, if that's still possible." We rebuilt slowly. She became the only family member I stayed in contact with, though she occasionally carried messages from my mother. Always requests for financial help, always ignored. By 25, NextGen Solutions had grown beyond educational technology into broader enterprise software solutions. We were valued at $500 million. My picture appeared in Forbes 30 Under 30. The article mentioned my estrangement from family in one brief paragraph. Richard tried a new approach. He showed up at my office in Boston, dressed impeccably, all smiles for my receptionist. "I'm here to see my daughter," he announced loudly in the lobby. I watched from the security monitor as my assistant explained I was unavailable. He became increasingly agitated, insisting that he had important family business to discuss. I sent my COO, Marcus, the same student who'd first noticed me in the library, to handle it. Miss Chen is in meetings all day, Marcus said firmly. Perhaps you should have called for an appointment. I don't need an appointment to see my own daughter, Richard snapped. You forfeited that right when you threw her out at 15, Marcus replied, loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. Now, should I call security, or would you prefer to leave with your dignity intact? He left, but not before shouting that I was an ungrateful, manipulative little bitch who had turned everyone against him. My team looked at me with new understanding. I'd never shared the full story with most of them. That evening, I sent a brief, formal email to both Richard and my mother. Any further attempts to contact me, my staff, my company, or anyone associated with my professional life will result in a restraining order and public legal action. This is your only warning. They must have finally understood I meant it, because direct contact stopped. But they weren't done. As NextGen continued to grow, entering Asian markets and expanding our product line, I began to hear rumors that a particular investment group was trying to orchestrate a hostile takeover. The group was small but aggressive, buying shares whenever possible and approaching my board members with concerns about my leadership. When I finally discovered who was behind it, I wasn't even surprised. Richard had pooled resources with several former colleagues, creating a shell company specifically designed to gain control of NextGen. They had accumulated nearly 8% of outstanding shares. Not enough for control, but enough to be disruptive. I called an emergency board meeting and laid out everything: the full history, the continued attempts at sabotage, the current scheme. Then I presented a plan to neutralize the threat. We implemented a poison pill strategy that made any hostile takeover prohibitively expensive, effectively shutting down Richard's plan before it gained traction. The board unanimously supported me. 2 major investors publicly stated their confidence in my leadership, sending our stock price soaring and costing Richard's group millions. That should have been the end, but there was one final act. At 29, I received an invitation to speak at my former high school's graduation ceremony. Despite everything, I accepted. It felt like closing a circle, a chance to perhaps help other young people who might be struggling with their own challenges. The day before the ceremony, a local newspaper ran a human interest story. Local success story returns home. Parents proud of daughter's achievements. The article quoted my mother extensively, talking about how they had always supported my entrepreneurial spirit and how family backing was crucial to my success. Richard was quoted saying he always knew I had potential and that he proudly watching from the sidelines as I achieved greatness. It was fiction so complete, so divorced from reality, that it left me breathless. They had rewritten history, inserting themselves as supportive characters in a success story they had tried repeatedly to sabotage. I had 2 choices: publicly contradict them, creating a media circus that would overshadow the graduation ceremony, or let it go. I chose a third path. At the ceremony, I spoke directly to the graduating class about resilience, about finding strength in adversity. I didn't mention my parents by name, but my message was clear. Sometimes the people who should support you will be the ones who try to limit you. Sometimes you have to build your own path when the prescribed one feels wrong. And sometimes you have to be your own family before you find your real one. In the audience, I saw my mother and Richard, smiling and nodding as if I was vindicating them. In the front row, I saw my grandmother, Dr. Winters, Marcus, and a team of NextGen employees who had come to support me, my real family. After the ceremony, Richard and my mother approached, arms open, ready to play the part of proud parents for the cameras present. I walked past them without acknowledgement, directly to my grandmother and the others waiting for me. Today, at 32, I run a tech conglomerate valued at $2.8 billion. I fund scholarships for homeless youth. I created a foundation that builds technology education centers in underserved communities. I mentor young developers, especially girls who don't fit the prescribed mold. My mother still occasionally sends emails, always about money, thinly disguised as attempts at reconciliation. Richard, I've heard, tells anyone who will listen that he always believed in me and takes credit for my entrepreneurial spirit. Some people probably even believe him. I don't waste energy on anger anymore. I don't need revenge or even acknowledgement from them. Their approval stopped mattering the moment they decided I wasn't worth supporting. The truth is, being thrown away was the most painful gift I ever received. It taught me self-reliance. It showed me who I really was when everything familiar was stripped away. It forced me to build something entirely my own. Sometimes I still wake up thinking I'm on that park bench, rain soaking through my jacket. But then I remember, I survived that night and every night after. I built something they said I couldn't. I became someone they said I would never be. To anyone listening who's been told they're not enough, who's been abandoned by the people who should have protected them, who's been told their dreams are worthless, I see you. Your worth isn't determined by those who failed to recognize it. Your potential doesn't diminish because someone couldn't see it. Sometimes the greatest success is simply surviving. Everything after that is just proof of what was always inside you. So tell me, have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever been told you couldn't achieve your dreams? What did you do to prove them wrong? Drop your story in the comments. If this resonated with you, type 1 below or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't like this story, I want to know why. What didn't feel right to you? Your voice matters here. If you want to hear more stories like this, stories of resilience, of overcoming impossible odds, of building something from nothing, hit that subscribe button. Because this isn't just a channel, it's a community of people who refuse to be defined by their worst moments. People who, like me, chose to build rather than break. Remember, your past doesn't decide your future. You do.